subscribe to our YouTube channel. Click the bell icon for updates.
Now, on the economic sanctions, they have been severe. There are shortages. The ruble has tumbled. There are foreign currency restrictions about money that can leave the country. Prices have increased. But so far, there is no sign that although the average Russian has been hurt significantly, and the Russians cannot prop up the ruble because about 50% of the Russian central bank's reserves in dollars are outside the country and blocked, there's no sense that despite some sporadic demonstrations that the government has come up against yet a protest movement that it cannot block. It has substantial coercive powers at its disposal. I've no doubt that it will use it if need be. I don't see any sign that Putin, despite the sanctions, is looking for a way out of this.
Right. Mr. Rossow, if you want to take the same question in terms of both the repercussions in Russia, which we haven't seen much of, but more so in the US with the midterm elections coming up, with possibility of the House and the Senate moving across, and in each country having their issues.
Well, clearly, I think when you see the Biden administration moving even further and looking at impacting Russia's oil and gas sectors, they picked up the signals that across the United States, there's generally support for intervening, at least through sanctions, as well as indirect military support in the conflict in Ukraine. It would have been very difficult with midterms coming up for any democratic elected leader trying to retain office and have some level of authority to take steps on energy that are going to increase prices at the pump for most Americans. So it seems that trying to assist Ukraine in this effort has been building up widespread support, but certainly the moral reasons behind it are very strong and powerful. And the administration was hoping from the get-go. I think a lot of us weren't quite sure that the Western reaction would be quite as strong and concerted as it has been. And so I think so far, you do see, and probably to Putin's surprise to some extent, that it has galvanized pushback from a lot of countries that hadn't been seeing eye to eye in recent years. So that might have been a bit of a miscalculation, I think, on Russia's side here. But I agree that so far you're not really seeing much interest in breaking, though.
Amitabh, can I add a word quickly on sanctions? We know a lot about the history of sanctions, and to summarize the literature, it is as follows: sometimes they work and sometimes they don't. But when a country has priced in some of the consequences and is determined to pursue an action that, for whatever reason, it deems extremely important, it will undergo substantial pain. So the idea that states are just economic calculators like accountants with green eye shades, I think misses the point that they fight or operate for all kinds of other reasons: insecurity, prestige, status, and so on. So the record of sanctions working here is mixed. The problem is that even if they work, it will not save Ukraine from what is now becoming a scaled up, highly punitive war. 2 million refugees have left the country, 800,000 displaced, about $900 million in assets destroyed so far. It will take Ukraine a very long time to come out from under this. What I don't understand is what Mr. Putin's endgame is here.
Mr. Rossow, if you want to talk about blowback in terms of how long can the impact, which is impacting the countries that are imposing these sanctions, for example, $4 a gallon for gas in the US, how long can that price be paid, and especially politically, if, like I said, there will be elections, midterm elections coming up?
Well, doing it so close, I think when we're talking just 6 months ahead of the midterm elections, it does feel like they've already taken into consideration the midterm elections, knowing that there's going to be, even if oil prices come down, even if gas prices at the pump come down by then, there's going to be that reminder and shock that this intervention, really did to some extent contribute to that. And whether the Biden administration decides to reopen some of the areas of the United States that we'd held off on our own exploration and development kind of remains to be seen. But, as we've seen in past conflicts, the American public can hold attention for a certain period of time and not too much longer. And so I suspect, we've kind of got a calculated the political calculation through the midterms. But after that, it's difficult to imagine, taking these kind of steps that would continue oil prices at a high level for much beyond that, I would think.
Professor Menon, do you want to take that?
Yes, I agree with Richard, but it goes well beyond oil. So Ukraine and Russia account for about 25% of all wheat exports. Ukraine is a major exporter of corn. Those prices have soared. Container shipping rates and shipping rates for tankers or fuel tankers have gone up substantially. Those costs will be passed on to the consumer. Metal prices have gone up. This will have an effect on Western growth rates. Already yesterday, Goldman Sachs downgraded its growth projections for the EU. It's expected to push inflation up here. Richard will correct me if I'm wrong, but I think our inflation rate now is the highest it's been in some decades. And so the question is, as the midterms come around, will the American public say, well, this is all Putin's fault, or will it at some point hold the government accountable? The Republicans, I'm sure, will do everything possible at some point to say that this is mismanagement by the Biden administration. Will the war end by then? I don't know.